The Cold War, a term used to describe tensions between the United States and the Soviet Union after World War I, World War II, until the breakup of the Soviet Union in 1991.
Reasons for the Cold War. Disagreement over political post-war goals. Soviet Union wanted to dominate Eastern Europe nations and create satellite nations. The United States had visions of Europe as free, democratic nations with self-determination, which is right to self-rule.
The United States adopted a new foreign policy called containment. The United States would resist Soviet Union's attempts to form new communist governments. The Truman Doctrine stated this as official position of the United States. Brinksmanship was the willingness to go to war to maintain peace.
The United States government initiated many policies to support these policies. They gave economic aid to Western European countries to help them rebuild after the war under the Marshall Plan. They also formed the NATO, which was the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, which created military alliances with other nations. The significance of NATO was that this was the first time the United States ever entered into a permanent alliance with another country. The United States also joined the United Nations in July 1945, along with 50 other countries, creating organizational structure to help maintain peace.
Reactions, policies to Cold War at home was called the Red Scare. Intense fear of communism spreading to the U.S., which led to the government actions to protect internal security. The creation of House of Un-American Activities Committee by Congress to investigate communist activity. McCarthyism was a restricted immigration of those people from communist countries. Trial and execution of Julius and Ethel Rosenberg for selling spy secrets to the Soviet Union.
Three other reasons why the Cold War developed between the Soviet Union and the United States were the Bolshevik Revolution established communist government in Russia in 1917. Soviets rejected Bernard Baruch's plan for regulation of nuclear energy and eliminating atomic weapons. Communist dictators came to power in satellite states in Eastern Europe.
The Korean War had lasted 3 years and prevented the spread of communism to South Korea. Significant in that the U.S. now showed military involvement as well as economic involvement. The U.S. defeats Japan and divides its territory, Korea, into two territories. U.S. withdraws troops and communists control North America while conservative nationalists control South Korea. North Korea invades South Korea in 1950. Truman sends American troops in, but they keep getting pushed back. Huge amounts of American casualties. Exact number, 54,000.
The United States was also involved in the Vietnam War. President Eisenhower sent money and military advisors to help train the South Vietnamese army. The Civil War in Vietnam became a Cold War issue between the U.S. and the Soviet Union, increasing fear that Vietnam would become communist, leading to other Southeast Asian countries becoming communist as well, became known as the domino theory. The U.S. supported leader Diem, who refused to hold elections and angered the Viet Cong.
President Johnson's War. After President Kennedy's assassination in 1963, Johnson was encouraged to continue to support South Vietnam. In 1964, two Navy destroyers claimed that they were fired upon, leading to the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution, passed by Congress, which greatly increased the president's military power. It marked the beginning of active military involvement in war, and also tipped the scale of checks and balances to favor the executive branch, later corrected by the War Powers Act of 1973. In February of 1965, Operation Rolling Thunder, a large bombing campaign in Vietnam, was underway. Also in 1965, number of troops sent from the U.S. went from 25,000 to nearly 200,000, which is almost 10 times more by the end of that year. Through the fact the Viet Cong had home advantage and knowledge of the land, U.S. forces used Agent Orange and napalm to try to win the war. They were deadly chemicals that caused long-term problems in soldiers in later years. At home, there were great opposition by 1968 to the war. Hawks, who were those for, versus the Doves, who were those against.
The Tet Offensive. In 1968, North Vietnam attacked more than 20 cities, including the capital of Saigon. It was considered a psychological success despite large numbers of casualties. President Johnson refused to send more troops. At home, there was an anti-war sentiment. In March of 1968, Johnson announced a halt to air and naval bombings. The new left, mostly college students, were politically active against the war. To show their opposition, they burned draft cards and American flags. Summer of 1968, the largest mass protests in history. Many refused to serve, draft dodgers, and conscientious objectors. Richard Nixon was also involved in the Vietnam War and instituted a policy known as Vietnamization, which would place responsibility of war on the South Vietnamese army. There were three major results of the Vietnam War. 1. Vietnam was left in ruins. Many fled the country as refugees. The United States failed to contain communism in Vietnam, and it showed that public protests could be effective and persuasive, and government actions need support for success.
In 1959, Castro overthrew the Batista dictatorship, which had been supported by the U.S., eventually leading up to the Cuban Revolution. Castro nationalized the property of U.S. corporations, which made the U.S. furious, so they started an economic boycott. Castro started to receive help from the Soviets. In 1961, the CIA made an attempt to invade Cuba and overthrow Castro. Since the Cuban Revolution, the U.S. was having a lot of problems with Castro, and he was starting to get more help from the Soviet Union. The U.S. did not want to settle the situation quietly or peacefully. The invasion was known as the Bay of Pigs. In October 1962, the Cuban Missile Crisis occurred. This was a major dispute between Cuba, United States, and the Russian Soviet Union. The United States discovered that the Cuban and Soviet government had nuclear missiles in Cuba. This idea of world nuclear destruction did not sit well with the U.S. The U.S. came up with an agreement with the Soviets that no invasions and no warfare should be involved in this problem. The Soviets withdrew their missiles from Cuba. Castro did not like this. In 1989, the Soviets stopped subsidizing the Cuban economy. The U.S. was still boycotting Cuba, so Castro turned to Europe and Canada to try and start trading commerce. The launching of Sputnik led to a massive space race with the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union launched the first satellites into orbit around the Earth. Technological leadership of the U.S. was put into question. More money was put into schooling to teach sciences, and NASA was created to have further efforts to explore outer space.
Overall, the Cold War period was a time of crisis and turmoil. The most significant decision was probably made by JFK in regards to the Cuban Missile Crisis. This was the closest the U.S. ever came to nuclear war. There were bomb shelters, and the duck and cover program was instituted.
Have a good day.
Good day. Joe Pontorno says have a good day. And he likes little boys.